Welcome to another video. In this tutorial I want to show you how to build a simple Spring Boot application where we're gonna be sending confirmation code to the user's emails and then validating them later on. I don't want to build the whole functionality, the whole application based on it. I just want to show you how to build this small piece of this process of sign up user to the website. So without further ado, let's get into it right now. Let's begin with configuring our Spring Boot project. So this is the basic configuration. We are going to be using Java, of course, Groovy, Gradle. And here in terms of dependencies, we're going to be using Spring Web to make all those REST requests, build those endpoints to let the user be able to connect to our server. Thymeleaf is a template engine that's gonna help us to build HTML template of our emails and style it appropriately. Another one is a Java mail sender library that will be able to connect us to our SMTP server to send emails. And the last one is the library that will be able us to connect to Redis, where we're gonna be saving our 6-digit generated codes and later on verifying them. So this is our basic setup. Let's begin with controller, our application main entry point. So in this case, we're gonna handle all HTTP requests. So first, to make this class entry point, we have to assign annotation REST controller to it. So now we created a bean that will be handling all the HTTP requests. And another annotation is our request mapping to create URL route. In this case, it's a confirmation API with the version. So first thing that we're gonna do is gonna inject our service. We'll implement the service later on. So we are creating the private field, and here in our constructor, we're just injecting it. First, let's define our send email confirmation endpoint. To do this, let's define the post request HTTP with a body, and this body is gonna be a record. So record has two fields, string email and the first name. Just send the email with the first name basically. And what else here? So this is our URL that we are gonna make a request to. Let's make our try catch block, and in this try catch block we'll try to send our email by invoking this method from our service. We'll define it later on, as I mentioned, and here we are gonna handle the errors, and by handling the errors we're gonna return the response entity, data integrity violation exception. We're gonna return the 400 HTTP status back to the user, and if everything went correct, we're gonna return 200 response, which is okay. Another endpoint is gonna be verify URL, another post mapping, and here as a request body we're gonna send this object, and this object consists of string code, email, and the first name. Once again, the code is our 6-digit number that we're gonna get from our email. So let's handle it. This time let's define our boolean value to check if the code was valid or not, and let's handle it with our try catch block. So once again we're gonna invoke register method from our service and return the boolean value. And here in the catch block we're gonna handle all the exceptions once again and return once again 400. Here, if the code is valid, we're gonna return string body, in this case when the registration was successful, response 200, and if was not valid, once again we're gonna send response 400 code. To define our service, we have to create a class with add service annotation. Actually, those annotations don't really matter, it's just the signature. So we know that that's the purpose of it, it's a service. So nevertheless, let's begin with creating our injection. So to this service, we have to inject two other services. First service is to save it to Redis and validate our code. Another service is to send emails through SMTP server. So here, to inject it through the constructor, we have to assign it to our private fields. And the first method, to implement this method, we have to take argument our pre-sign up DTO user data. And the first thing that we're gonna check is to generate and store our code from our verification service. And this code will assign to our value. And by having this code, we're gonna invoke the method from our email service to send it to the user. All the details we're gonna implement later on. Another method, we're gonna register the user, but first we have to check if the code is valid. And by invoking this verify method from verification service, we just put the email and code. And we put email because that's our key in our Redis database. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to find the value to validate it. So if it's validate, if it's not validate, then we just return false. And if it's validate, we just doing all the stuff, create a user, save it to database, and etc. I'm gonna omit this right now because this tutorial is focusing on generating the code and handling all this process of user verification. Now let's create our email service. Let's previously create a class and assign annotation add service to it. And now we have to inject another two services. First one is our library, Java Mail Sender, is a basic SMTP gonna configure later on. And another one is from Thymeleaf template engine that we're gonna handle all the HTML templates. So as always, use our constructor to inject and assign to private fields. So the first method is to send registration code. So as arguments, we are taking email, code, and name. All the stuff related to Java Mail Sender, we have to handle all the exceptions. In case of invalid data, invalid the properties from application properties, so we need to handle it. Let's define all the variables that we're gonna inject into our Thymeleaf template. Let's create a map with the key as a string and object any kind of type. It's gonna be string, obviously. So let's just assign to name, code, and year, and it has to match all the defined variables in our template. So now we're gonna invoke our private method to send HTML message. So it's gonna take our email address. This is gonna be a title of the email, the model that we just defined, and this is the name of our template from our resources folder. Let's cache all the exceptions. So let's cache just general exceptions. And this is not a good practice, just for tutorial purpose. Let's print all the stack in our console so we can see what's wrong. So let's define our private method. That's gonna throw messaging exception from our Thymeleaf template engine. So first we have to create a Thymeleaf context, and in this context we can set all the variables that we defined previously. And the next thing, we have to use the processor. So to process the template, we have to put the name of the template. It's gonna be automatically loaded from this folder, and load our contexts will all define model. So now we have our HTML body that was generated by a template engine. We can create meme message, and in the message we're gonna assign the helper. By defining the meme message, we can now define all the contexts of the message that we're gonna send. To who, from who, the subject of the email, content of the email. From who has to match this SMTP server that you define. We can put the flag if it's HTML or just a simple text message. And now we just invoked the send, passing our meme message. So that's all from our email service. For our verification service, assign two private variables. So the first field is to handle all the Redis methods to save and to get the value. So by injecting the string Redis template. Another private field is our secure random, that is non-deterministic, generating random value non-deterministically. It's compliance with security. String Redis template, we have to inject it through constructor. Our first method is to generate and store code. So all the operations we have to handle in our try-catch block, because it might not connect to Redis or something else might happen. So let's create try-catch block. Let's generate our random value. So to our 100,000 we are adding our random number. We placed the upper limit, which is 900,000. So if we add it to, then we will get something range between 100,000 and 999. And here we have to prepare the verify key, which is based on email of the user, and this will be stored in our Redis. So for here we have to invoke ops for value method and set the key, the hour generated code, and here we're gonna set the timeout that it's gonna invalidate after 5 minutes in this case. And what else? We're just returning the code. But in case of unavailable Redis connection or wrong authorization or something, we have to handle it by catching some general exception in this case, and we'll just print it to our console. Another method is to verify our code that's gonna be sent by a user. So here to find the value, so we have to create a key that is based on user email, and here is our code. So to get the value, we just invoke the get method, simple as that, and we're gonna receive our code. So now first we have to check if it's null or not, if it expire or not, and if it will equals the code that's sent by a user, and if not, we're not gonna register the user. So what's good about all the libraries that we use in this tutorial, that they don't require a lot of configuration. All you have to do in application properties file, that is in our resources folder, you have to define configuration for SMTP server, so your host, port, username, passwords, and so on. If you want to authenticate, if you want to TLS be enabled. Redis we are using locally, so it's going to be localhost, and that's the default port that we're going to use. And here for Thymeleaf template engine, we're going to use our class path templates, the folder which is here, and here we're gonna define all the email template in HTML format. So that's all from the configuration, but we have to create one more configuration file. So I mentioned before there is not much configuration, but let's define our configuration bin for Redis. So we'll have to decide what Redis factor we're gonna use. To create configuration file, you have to create a class, of course, with annotation configuration. We'll automatically bind this class with config files, and here we'll create a bin to return Redis template we're gonna use. So we're gonna use the most basic and simple default connection factory properties, and we're gonna just pass to this template and return. So by defining this bin, now we can use it in our previous verification service by dependency inject it over here. So that's all what we need. Now let's define our HTML email template. So to do this, just create a file with HTML extension in our templates folder. So this is how I call it. It has a basic HTML structure with the exception of a Thymeleaf attribute here to use all the Thymeleaf variables in our template. So to style it, doing it in a header tag, regular, but because styling using CSS in email is quite tricky, to be able to align all the elements in our email template, the best way is to use table. So with table, now we can use it by align attribute. So let's create here our container for email in our body section, and here will be our table row with some random image of company logo. To make it looks good, you have to define the width height, straightforward. And another table row is gonna be our username. So here with th attribute, it's coming from Thymeleaf, and here in the comment section you can define the type of the variable that you're passing. So this IntelliJ will give you a warning if the passing value doesn't match this type. So nevertheless, it's because of its text, so you're passing it here in That's how syntax looks like. So it will basically replace all the content that is inside our tag, whatever the tag you're gonna assign it to. Hard-coded it, your registered code here, and in another table row, in styled box align center, we're gonna pass our code to replace all the content here. And the last is just some information about all the copyrights and basically a footer of our email. So here, by having those table rows, you're able to align it on the center, on the left or right, because flex doesn't work in email templates, unfortunately. Even using a margin by auto doesn't work as well, so this is the only way. I know this technology is archaic, I can't help, it is how it is, so we have to deal with it this way. Another tip for all of you that are using Windows: if you want to run Redis locally, all you have to do is to install Docker desktop version. After you install it, you'll have access to command line, and if you want to run it with just one command, it's super easy. You're just using docker run deployment, you define the port, the name, the container, and you just type Redis. If you click enter, even though it didn't find the image, it will automatically download it for you. So sometimes it will throw some errors, but if you do it once again, it will work. Let's wait until it will finish and it will be up and running with default configurations. Alright, so it downloaded the image and now our Redis is supposed to be up and running. So to verify it, all we have to do is Redis CLI. So here we just executing through Docker Redis CLI. So now just you can see the local host with the port, and if we type ping, we're supposed to get the pong. So server responded, everything's up and running. So now we can test our application. The fastest way to test our application is to use, if you are using IntelliJ, so you can define HTTP file. And just because IntelliJ has built-in plugin that you can test it in this file in the super simple syntax, request, all kinds of requests, HTTP requests. So that's what we're gonna define. First, let's check if our application is working. So I use my private credentials for it. Let's see if our application will start and how long it's gonna take to build it. And as you can see, our Tomcat server is running on port 8080, our default. Alright, application is working. So if you want to test our application, you have a couple of options, but the most convenient for me, I think, is to create HTTP file in our IntelliJ project. So the only requirement is you need to use IntelliJ basically, because they have this built-in plugin with simple HTTP requests. So by creating this file, you can define using those hashtags. You're just creating the name of the request, just post, URL, content type, and here is our body. So this is to send sign-up code endpoint, and another endpoint is to verify it. So here we'll just pass code, email, and first name to verify it. So okay, let me send you and show you how the email looks like. So after sending our confirmation code, this is what we received on our email. So this is the logo I mentioned before, our registration code box, we have our 6 digits. So now let's verify them. So now once again, by sending a post request to this endpoint, we received successful user registration response and 200 HTTP status code. So everything is working fine as it's supposed to. So I hope after this tutorial you have a better understanding how to implement the confirmation code process. As you can see, it's not really complex, it's rather simple. You have to remember that using Redis here is the best choice because of the speed that you can save it to the database and receive it from the database. That's all in this tutorial, see you in the next one.